Good evening. Evidence-Based Practice PICO Research Video Assignment by Zaria Bean. For this presentation, I have broken it up into 5 categories. My PICO question, my why, the articles I used, whether they are a qualitative or quantitative study, as well as the takeaways I received from them. Starting with my PICO question. So first, looking at the components of a PICO question, you first have to have a P, a population or patient. An I, you have to have an intervention or an indicator. C, you have to have a comparator or a control. And O, you have to have an outcome. So for my population, I chose young adults ages 18 to 30 who are experiencing a poor work-leisure balance or that work-life balance. My intervention I put as participation in structured recreational therapy programs. My control is no recreational therapy or unstructured leisure time. My outcome is improved perceived life balance or that work-life balance, reduced stress, and an increase in leisure satisfaction. So my question as a whole is in young adults with poor work-leisure balance or that work-life balance, does participation in structured therapy programs compared to no interventions or unstructured leisure time improve their perceived life balance, reduce stress, and increase leisure satisfaction? So touching on the why for this, right? So basically, I struggle with finding that work-life balance. I have a full-time job as a rehabilitation aide at the mental health hospital here in Bermuda. I also bartend on the side, while being a full-time student, while having other responsibilities like sign language programs and so on and so forth. So I kind of wanted to see if there was any literature that kind of backed up what I am struggling with, and that is finding that balance, being able to live life in early 20s while still kind of getting that foundation for adulthood, working, saving money, but then also kind of living life and enjoying time when I'm young, you know what I mean? So I wanted to see if I could find literature that kind of backs that and supports my PICO question, and I did. So I'm going to take a look at some of that now. So we will look at two therapeutic recreational articles or journals that kind of touch on the idea around that work-leisure balance, as well as coping and stressing and the skills needed to manage those things. So let's take a look at that. So, looking at my article number 1, it was titled The Impact of Therapeutic Recreation Practices on the Quality of Life, Mental Well-Being, and Self-Esteem of Young Adults, which ties in perfectly to my PICO question, looking at that work-life balance, that quality of life with young adults, dealing with work, life, and the stresses that come with that, and also coping with that. So basically, this article found that like creative and nature-based recreation such as like art, music, or mindfulness help young adults feel less stressed. They felt more confident, and then they were more emotionally aware. This study showed that combining fun activities with group support can improve mental health and self-esteem, which is kind of what I was thinking about, but I kind of just wanted that support in my already knowledge, right? I think this article is helpful for us as recreational therapists or future recreational therapists in helping us to understand how we design programs that help young people feel heard, and help to build resilience and connect with others. It's nothing worse than like growing up and not having that support system. And I think a lot of young people, whether they are struggling with that work-life balance or have a work-life balance, they still need that support. So having therapy programs or activities that go on that helps you support them will be beneficial in this. So that was kind of like the emphasis of this study, was looking at the benefits of involving recreational therapy and the impact it has on quality of life, the mental well-being of a young person, as well as the benefits it has to their self-esteem. Looking at the second article, it was titled Leisure and Stress Coping Implications for Therapeutic Recreation Practice. So, in one article, it looked at the benefits. On this article, it's looking at understanding the stress and knowing the coping skills that can help you deal with it. So this article kind of explained how leisure activities like relaxing and socializing or doing hobbies that one enjoys can help people to manage their stress. So kind of like the main problem in finding that work-life balance is that work becomes so stressful that we don't know how to cope with it, which is why we can't get that balance. You know what I mean? So it basically, this article wasn't really a study, but it kind of looked at other literature that backed what they were thinking about. So it showed that leisure improves mental health and helps people feel more in control. This matters for recreational therapists because it shows that leisure can be used as a tool to help clients cope. As therapists, we should match activities to a person's needs, values, and background to support their well being and resilience. So these kind of coincide together. The well being, the emotional support, the self esteem, all ties in together with both of these articles just from two different perspectives. So, touching briefly on quantitative versus qualitative studies, research studies. As we know, quantitative studies kind of has those numbers, the statistics, the blah stuff, you know what I mean? The boring stuff. How much, how many, how often. It has a measurement, whereas qualitative studies or qualitative research studies has more of those words or stories or observations. So my first article that kind of talk about that well-being, that self-esteem, actually did a quantitative and qualitative study. So they had the numbers, and based off the numbers, they had like the participants' explanation of why, and they used both to come up with their summary or their conclusion. Whereas my second article looked at more of a qualitative research study review, where they looked at qualitative research and research literature and kind of summarize their findings through other person's qualitative research. They didn't really do a research study, they kind of just used other qualitative researches to back their opinion, if that makes sense. So some final takeaways that I got from my first article, which is the impact of therapeutic recreation on young adults' mental health, is one, that creative and nature-based activities like art and music and mindfulness help young adults feel less stressed and more confident. Two, the study used mixed methods, that quantitative and qualitative study, which combined the surveys, the numbers, and the interviews, the qualitative stories, to show both emotional and measurable improvements. Um, it also touched on that participants reported feeling heard and more resilient, showing the power of expressive group activities. I touched on this a little bit earlier, talking about that support system is very much needed in young adults. It did touch on women, especially feeling benefited, which is beautiful because I did read in some studies that it was mainly done on men. So seeing that the women got a chance, sometimes they think that women have it all together, and sometimes we don't. So it was nice to see that they were able to do this study and reduce that gender gap in mental health outcomes. And lastly, Number five, the fifth point that got taken away was that therapeutic recreation programs can support public health and should be used in schools and communities to help young adults grow emotionally and socially. And I 100% agree with that. I personally feel that if in my final years of schooling, 11th and 12th grade, especially high school, if we were told or taught that having leisure and doing schoolwork coincide, and to make sure that we prioritize our health, and not health like physical health, but our mental health, our emotional health, and our spiritual health. I think that being a young adult and navigating through life and not just work, but making sure I'm working and having fun would have been beneficial. So I 100% agree with point number five. Looking at the takeaways from my second article, Leisure and Stress Coping. Basically, leisure helps people manage stress. Point blank simple. By offering emotional relief and a positive distraction, especially during tough times. Going on a walk, reading a book, just sitting by the ocean, being in nature definitely helps to reduce people's stress. Two main concepts that guide leisure coping is leisure coping beliefs, which is like thinking that leisure helps, which it does, and leisure coping strategies, actually using leisure to cope. So basically, this assignment is kind of like the second article, right? I had leisure coping beliefs, like I knew that they helped, but digging a little deeper and understanding the research behind how and why they help kind of helps to show that leisure coping strategies are important. Number three, leisure supports identity and resilience, help people reconnect with their values and feel more in control. So kind of touching on to the first article, that self-esteem, knowing who you are, understanding your purpose helps with, leisure helps to do that. Number four, different people cope in different ways. Different people handle things differently. Like the same stress for you might not be the same stressor for me. So it all depends on like your age, your gender, your culture, your demographic, and like I said, the type of stress. So understanding that was very important, because the same stuff that I would recommend or that I would do for my leisure is not for the next person. Like I might love a walk, but a walk might not be for someone else. They might enjoy sitting at home listening to music. So it all just depends. So understanding and finding that leisure activity that works for you and helps you to reduce your stress or cope with it is very important. And then lastly, recreation therapists should tailor programs to each person's background, needs, and coping style. So definitely looking at that person-centered approach, understanding that whatever we create is for the client themselves, and it should be tailored to what they need and what they want. So if I was to do this for myself, it would be for me. But if I was to do this for a client, it would be for them. And it probably won't have the same things that I would do for myself. So understanding that there's not a textbook approach, like a clear outline, like, oh, this is what you do for this stress, this is what you do for this stress. For each person, it will be different. So definitely understanding. Thank you. So in conclusion, yes. To answer my PICO question, yes. Using or having structured leisure does benefit a young adult in understanding and dealing with that work-life balance. The stresses of every day, getting up for work, the idea of, oh, I'm going to save for my car, I'm going to save for my house, I want a family, I want this, I want that, but also I want to go to this party, I want to have fun, is real. And finding and digging deep and doing that leisure exploration, or trying different things that studies have shown that reduce stress, to see what works best for you and how you can cope with stress, is very important. Thank you very much. Bye now.